All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to break down the source material on something that's being called a massive economic earthquake, a truly historic shift, the New Delhi Pact.
And, the sources we're digging into today, they don't mess around. They kick things off with this huge, provocative question right up front. I mean, is this really the end of American hegemony? So what on earth could be happening to even make someone ask that?
Well, the answer, at least to start, is this number. $200 billion. That's the size of a massive new resource pact that India has just locked in with Canada, Australia, and some key European players. But honestly, the money, that's not even the most interesting part of the story. Not by a long shot.
Yeah, this right here is the heart of it. The argument from the source material is that we are absolutely not talking about just another trade deal. No way. This is the deliberate construction of an entirely new parallel economic system, one designed from the ground up to function without the United States.
So you have to ask, right? What triggers a move this dramatic? Well, according to the reporting we're looking at, it all started with a single phone call.
And that phone call presented India with a major fork in the road. The allegation is that President Trump basically demanded India put American priorities first. But instead of going along with it, Prime Minister Modi is reported to have made a completely different choice, to go out and find new partners who would respect India's independence.
And that brings us to this key idea, strategic autonomy. You gotta understand, this concept is described as being part of India's foreign policy DNA for decades. It's this core belief that they won't be subordinate to any other power. And that principle really helps make sense of why they would react this way to that kind of pressure.
Okay, so the decision was made. India is looking for alternatives. But how do you get from that decision to a massive global pact? Well, let's take a look at the architects who put this whole thing together.
And what's crazy is how fast this apparently happened. The sources say it started with a call from Modi's team to Canada. But then, a guy named Mark Carney gets involved, and he reportedly sees something much, much bigger. Not just a deal, but a chance to build a whole new system. So he brings in Australia for their critical resources, and then gets European partners on board for their capital and industrial power. And the source material gives so much credit to Carney. I mean, look at this quote. It calls him maybe the most effective strategic thinker in global politics right now. Why? Because it was apparently his systems-level thinking, his knack for seeing how all these different pieces could connect, that turned one phone call into a globe-spanning alliance. All right, so we've got the origin story and the key players, but what is the New Delhi Pact, actually? What's inside it? Let's break down the 5 pillars that the sources say make up this new economic system. So here they are, the 5 pillars of the pact: coordinated resources, manufacturing, energy security, standards, and finance. You can see this is designed to be a really comprehensive framework, right? It covers pretty much everything from digging stuff out of the ground to how you pay for it. Okay, now, this is where it gets really interesting. Because according to the source, each one of these pillars isn't just about cooperation, it's a direct challenge to a specific area where the US has historically been dominant. We're talking about new supply chains for resources, a new manufacturing base, even rival technical standards. It looks like it's systematically designed to offer an alternative to the US-led global system at every single level.
And just look at the sheer scale of this alternative. You've got a consumer market of over 2 billion people in this pact. Compare that to about 330 million in the US. The argument here is that this creates a whole new center of gravity in the world economy. Suddenly, depending on the American consumer, it's not the only game in town anymore.
But of all of these pillars, the sources are all pointing to one as the real game changer: the financial arrangements. Look, the idea isn't to kill the US dollar tomorrow. It's much smarter than that. It's about building the pipes, the infrastructure, piece by piece to allow massive amounts of trade to happen without ever touching the dollar. And that, in the long run, chips away at the very foundation of American global power.
Okay, so you drop a bomb like this on the world stage. It's going to make some waves, right? Let's look at how the world is reacting right now and what the source material predicts could be coming down the line.
And the reaction was immediate. You saw prices for critical materials just shoot up. The currencies of all the countries in the pact got stronger. And the reaction in Washington, D.C.? The sources describe it as just confusion. Confusion and a whole lot of concern.
And this quote really says it all, doesn't it? The core argument here is that American policymakers just didn't see this coming.
They operated on the assumption that they held all the cards, that a country like India would eventually just have to fall in line. Well, the New Delhi Pact showed that assumption wasn't just wrong, it was, to use their words, catastrophically wrong.
And don't think for a second this is the end of the story. The sources claim that a whole bunch of other countries are on the sidelines watching this very, very closely. We're talking about heavy hitters like Japan and South Korea, fast-growing ASEAN nations, even countries in the Middle East. They're all running the numbers, trying to figure out if maybe, just maybe, this new club is a better fit for them.
So what's the final verdict from the source material? It's pretty brutal. The conclusion is that this historic shift wasn't caused by some great rival finally beating the United States. No. It's framed as a totally self-inflicted wound, an unintended, disastrous consequence of pressure tactics that pushed America's own partners into building the exact kind of alternative system the U.S. has spent decades trying to prevent. Which leaves us with the final massive question that the source material puts on the table. Is this it? Is this the moment we'll look back on as the real beginning of a multipolar world? A world where there isn't just one center of power, but several, and where you no longer need a green light from Washington to get big things done. It's a huge thought to end on.